You're listening to Dead Air Podcast, part of SplatterPictures.net.
What's up, everybody? Wes, Dead Air Night with always.
Typical Lydia.
Today's show, we're going to be doing the 1976 Tobe Hooper directed cult classic, Eaten Alive. Whoo. That's my owl.
That's a good owl, because like, I don't know if it's just been the days. What I do need to do is watch Twin Peaks and get it over with. We've watched like owl stuff. There was owl stuff in Killers of the Flower Moon, and now this grand impersonation of an owl that makes no fucking sense. But yeah, it's just owls everywhere.
Owls everywhere, just like you are going to see bodies and blood everywhere in Eaten Alive. This is a West pick, actually, and I'm surprised we've never done this film before, but every time I thought of it and thought hard about it, I remembered, no, we haven't actually done this film. When it comes to Tobe Hooper's work, we've of course done commentary tracks for his most famous works, Texas Chainsaw 1 and 2. We've also covered The Funhouse, which was his first big studio film. And if you go back to the Funhouse episode, you'll actually see that I did briefly mention Eaten Alive. I think I tossed it out there in a sentence about this film. And in a lot of ways, this film has been eaten alive by Tobe Hooper's very own career.
Absolutely overshadowed. He has a lot of really great movies, and we could probably talk about every single Tobe Hooper film on this show, except for maybe Poltergeist, because I'm just not a fan, and I don't really count it as horror as much. The remake's even more horror than the original, I find.
You know what I can never get over with Poltergeist is how no one's really scared. There's like a Disney Funhouse aspect, Disney ride aspect to the family's initial reaction to the haunting, which I can't think of another horror movie that reacts that way. The mother, when this chair is sliding around, that is not terror. That is excitement and wonder. And I don't want to get into a whole thing about Poltergeist, but I agree with you. The tone of Poltergeist is very weird.
Yeah, he's got a singular vision with these films, though, which is like terrorize people with maniacs. It works very well. I'm thinking of this hand in hand with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, not only because it has a really similar theme, it's got a similar location, it even shares actresses. So like there's a lot similar going on here. Different tools, not chainsaw, but still like farm equipment to a certain extent. And I love the brutality of this film. This is a video nasty, is it not?
This is the first successfully prosecuted video nasty. In fact, so the one thing that I always think about is Mary Whitehead, like just watching Eaten Alive and just clutching her pearls and being like, oh, Buck is rarin' to fuck? I never. She's British, so perhaps she'd be a little bit more hoity-toity about it. But yes, this is a video nasty. For a brief understanding of that, dear listeners, if you're not familiar, the video nasty list was essentially a list of 20 some odd films that were deemed by the British censorships to be unfit for broadcast anywhere. It was illegal to watch these films. Texas Chainsaw made the list, and as well did Eaten Alive. A lot of films were demanded to be edited. The cost of editing their films prohibitively expensive. So in a lot of cases, you could hand your film over to be butchered by censors and then brought back, and however they leave it is how you can broadcast it. Or you can just take the loss and your film can't be distributed in the United Kingdom, which a lot of films who were successfully prosecuted just went ahead and did that. I don't know. It elevated a lot of these films in people's minds. So if you want to see things like Night of the Bloody Apes or Bloodsucking Freaks or Madhouse or any of the other successfully prosecuted films, it made it more tantalizing to do so. But the Video Nasty List was something that Cannibal Holocaust, that's another really famous one. For various reasons, all of these films were prosecuted and eaten alive for its gratuitous gore and violence, Lydia, is why it was successfully prosecuted and added to that illustrious list of terror.
It's just so very realistic, and I get that. There is a scene that is the most bloody and the most gory, really, but it has almost like a comedic element and a very realistic element that makes it even more deeply unsettling, and we'll get to that eventually. But I found that it was so immensely watchable. I think it's got to suck being a censor because you're watching this theatrical, well put together, wonderfully acted with like some great name actors in it. And they're all doing their absolute best. The setting is wonderful. The sound is great. The gore is even very artistically done. But yeah, you're going to have to stamp it with the seal of disapproval, unfortunately, because it is just so immensely watchable. And I feel really bad that I hadn't got to this sooner because I like Tobe Hooper's work. This is such a classic example of Tobe Hooper's filmmaking that I feel like I'd rip myself off not watching it sooner. I'm shocked I hadn't watched it sooner. I highly recommend everyone watch it if they haven't because it's so fun and it's so good.
I'm so happy that you dug it. I was hoping you would. I'm not gonna lie. So I've been recommending a couple of things here and there, and while you liked aspects of some of the films I feel like I had been bringing to the show lately, I wasn't getting that like sense, oh, she really liked this film. And I'm gonna be honest with you, gang, I would have been fucking heartbroken if we brought Eaten Alive to the show and Lydia was not all smiles. But I got a text message from her the other day that basically said within the first 10 minutes, I could tell you approved. So I was like, yes, okay, we got one. And why wouldn't you like it? This is Redneck Psycho.
Very much me. It is very me. It reminds me of home in so many ways. And I'm not even from the Deep South. I mean, because it is very South. If you like the follow-up to the film X with Pearl, and you like those opening scenes where she's throwing a chicken to the crocodile in the swamp sort of thing, get that feel. If you like Scorchers, if you like sort of just this madcap down south, their brains are obviously boiled. If you like that sort of aspect of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like this is really, really a good pick.
This film is a perfect example of the idea of one more again. Let's try it again. Now with our accumulated knowledge of filmmaking. This film was written by Kim Henkel, who was a co-writer of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Tobe Hooper back as a director. They bring back Marilyn Burns, and they bring back the same kind of aesthetic. Instead of being in Texas, we are going to, I don't know, what are they in, like Florida or something like that, like or something to that effect, or maybe it is Texas as well,
or Carolinas, somewhere like that, like it's somewhere where there's alligators.
Then they take the other missing ingredient, which is let's write a story based off of a real killer. Now, Tobe Hooper very famously making Texas Chainsaw based off of an article that he had read about Ed Gein, but he didn't really remember that was the famous killer that he was modeling Texas Chainsaw afterwards. It was only after the film was mentioned and then people started noticing similarities, and he was like, oh, that article was about Ed Gein. This time very deliberately based off of the alleged serial killer of Joe Ball, who was operating in South Texas, responsible for a lot of local women going missing, and he owned a saloon in Ellendorf, Texas, and that saloon had a pond built in the back that had 5 alligators in it, and allegedly he used the alligators to dispose of bodies. And what do we have here? We have a manic hillbilly innkeeper who has exotic animals, plus this crocodile, alligator from Africa, poached to him from some like illustrious poacher in Gainesville, and feeding people to his crocodile. But I'm getting ahead of myself, Lydia. What is this movie even about anyways?
I think that this movie is a lot about this poor Nile crocodile taken out of its environment and thrust into an environment where it doesn't really know how to cope, and it sees things that appear to be like him but don't act like him, and he's taken out of his place where he knew where to find food, so now he just takes what's thrown at him. Much like the people that end up at the Starlight Motel, they are out of their environment and they don't realize it because they meet Judd, who appears to be a normal functioning adult human being, and he's really honestly not. They seem to be at this hotel that appears to be a nice place to rest their head safely for the evening, but it's really fucking not.
It's really, really not. And it's funny because I think the glasses sell it. I think when Judd has his glasses on with the tape in the middle of them, he looks so harmless. He looks so sweet, but it has this classic coiled Tobe Hooper spring. All of these fucking characters are just waiting to get to bug fuck hysteria at any moment. And you think, oh, it's just the killers. No, it is not just the killers. Everyone just seems like on the verge of killing each other at all fucking times.
The only person who seems to be behaving normally is the girl that played Lindsay in the, at this time, future Halloween film, who basically spends a lot of time screaming underneath the house. But, I mean, that's a proper response to what's going on with the adults around her in this film. Because, you know, I had tried to look it up, like, what is going on with Roy in the bedroom, like, when he starts just losing his mind. Like, I really want to get your opinion on that, because I've only seen this once and only recently, and I didn't understand what the hell was going on with Roy, but I do understand what is going on with Buck. Oh, Buck. That is the first line, his first spoken line in this film, is it not? That's the first thing we hear.
It is. His name is Buck, and he is raring to fuck. He is, what do you want to say? It's, the reason why I like to call this redneck psycho is because we got ourselves like a Janet Leigh type blonde, except this time she is a prostitute, and Robert Englund, exceptionally young and wiry, lithe Robert Englund, is just wanting to have sex with her in a way that she does not want to have sex. We'll leave it at that. And it starts so tense. And he's great. Robert Englund in this movie is fantastic. And one of the things that's so great is this cast. You mentioned Kyle Richards. She's, she goes on to be in Halloween and later on Halloween Kills as little Lindsay Wallace. Like I just said, Robert Englund is in this. Marilyn Burns comes back as Faye. And Lynette, Janice Blythe, that's Hills Have Eyes. She's Ruby. And she's in The Incredible Melting Man and The Drive-In Massacre. And of course, all of this under the watchful eye of Tobe Hooper. There's so much here. Roy, the tweaker husband, is in the Funhouse. He's Marco the Magnificent. So there's lots of people that have been working with Tobe Hooper or working in horror, particularly in 1970s. My take on Roy is this. He fucking hates his wife.
Yes, he does.
And he is dealing with the stress of, in effect, the situation is this. The family goes to the inn because he needs to go to the washroom. Everyone gets out, they stretch their legs, they're already arguing with his wife. Angie, who, just in case it's not sad enough that you're going to have a little girl here with a little dog, we'll just give her polio on top of it.
Yeah.
So
Which she acts around very, very well.
Very, very well. She's great. Like she's so great. And obviously we know her best for Halloween, but I definitely see watching this film how she gets the part in Halloween, because you need a child actor who can do this fucking shit, and she's great. Effectively, Snoopy gets killed because he had to go take a leak, and so this little pit stop to go to the bathroom and get the hell out of here, because again, they're only an hour away from where they need to go. He is so riddled with guilt, and it's that moment when Faye turns her head from him to sort of tend to the kid, and him just sweaty and bug-eyed, like he was just like, "You're blaming me? I don't want to be blamed for this. I don't fucking like you, and I don't want to be a father, and I bet this road trip wasn't even my idea, so I just want to fucking rip your throat out." And then he just like doesn't do it, and then it's just like this misplaced rage, mania. It's wild. It's so fucking wild. And then it makes his death, when he's going off to be all Atticus Finch on the crocodile, so much more satisfying, because I love watching that motherfucker get killed, because he's so annoying.
I really like her response to all of this, because his wife's just looking at him like Faye's just like, "Oh, this again? You're trying to strangle me from behind again? Like, oh, you're losing your mind again? Oh, you're rocking back and forth and stuttering like a madman again? Oh, you're going to go off and kill this alligator again?" She's just like, "Oh, daddy's off to save the day." And she's got such a shitty attitude about it, and acts like it's no big deal. When if somebody were acting the way he's acting, I think I would need the guys with the butterfly nets and the shirts that do up in the back.
It's crazy. It really is. And this level of mania and rage fits so well in Tobe Hooper's world. This film's entire aesthetic and vibe fits so perfectly with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You can imagine this is just taking place an hour drive down the road, right?
Not even, maybe 10 minutes, because you also have that feeling of like everybody's in on it in a way. And we go to other places. We go to the bar. We go to the brothel down the road. And the brothel keeper is fantastic. And she seems to know what's going on, but with that very Texas Chainsaw Massacre feel. You know, you're in on it to a certain extent, or don't care. You're either keeping your nose out of other people's business, or you're helping protect them in one way or the other, or both at the same time, which I think a lot of people in this area are doing.
When Clara gets killed out, Miss Haiti is the person who runs the brothel. Again, something strange about Tobe Hooper is, instead of hiring older people, he just seems to like to put young people in old makeup. And I don't know what that's about, but it's very interesting. She kicks her out. One of the den mothers, I suppose, Ruby, she gives Clara some money and says, "Go down the road, but don't say that you work in the brothel." When she makes it to the Starlight Inn, Judd seems like a kind old shopkeeper. Again, this is the psycho aspect of it. He's almost like a mild-mannered, older Norman Bates in a sleepy inn that not a lot of people go to, because perhaps they built a highway not too far from here. This is where you get a sense. This entire film, by the way, was done on studio, so there's an airless claustrophobic quality to everything. They're not actually shooting outside, and it gives into this extremely effective but bizarre specific type of lighting where they're bathing everything in hard reds or hard blues depending on the mood of whatever scene they're trying to go for. Sometimes they have natural light, and then sometimes they completely throw natural light out the window because, well, I guess they're just not interested in filming in that aspect. But when Clara doesn't deny that she is from that brothel, Judd makes that assumption, he goes fucking nuts. And you can't really get the sense of, are you trying to sexually assault her? Are you trying to or do you not even know what you're doing? You seem kind of in like a fugue state. But long story short is he stabs her to death with it's like an old rake or something. And then while she's still sort of reaching for her life, throws her into this gator pit where he just has like this big gator. Now he's got like monkeys, like he's got like exotic pets. I think the idea is come to my inn and look at the exotic pets as like an extra attraction. The monkey dies almost in like, I guess, of old age or neglect or however you would want to imagine it. And then you get this sense of him cleaning up his mess and muttering to himself. And this, of course, brings a whole bunch of trouble to his door.
Yeah, his muttering mirrors somewhat Roy's. Roy almost seems more maniacal than Judd, but Judd's been dealing with this for a long time, probably. That's what I'm assuming, why he seems to just accept. He doesn't really beat himself up about what he's done. He just sort of goes about tidying the place up and sort of like admonishes himself, but gently in a way. I think he's just very used to this. He reminds me quite a bit when he's in his calm mode of Geordie Verrill, played by Stephen King in Creepshow. Just very almost childlike, very chill, very sweet old gentleman kind of vibe. But when he's going mental, like this is why he's on some of the covers with that enraged look, swinging a scythe. Like he is a strong, angry person. His kills don't seem to take a heck of a long time either because he knows what he's doing. He's very used to this. He's probably thrown so many people to this crocodile, and that's the vibe we get right away with this very first kill, that he's very used to this sort of bullshit. Kind of wild that he doesn't sexually assault her necessarily. He begins in a way that seems like it's going to lead there. And we have to link the sex to his hatred because it just seems that that sets him off. And everyone around there seems to know that sets him off. But this film stops short of that, even though it starts out with some like sort of rough sex gone bad, but not a sexual assault scene necessarily. We have clothes ripping, and I guess if you want to say a bodice ripper in a way, but bodice ripping is supposed to be a good thing, but the bodice ripping here is unwelcome bodice ripping. But it doesn't really go too deeply into that, thank God. But like this is a sense that you get throughout the film and later on in the film with people being tied up and such, and just the state that the women find themselves in. There's like this threat. And I doubt that that's ever happened in the fictional past of Judd, that he's sexually assaulted any of these people he's thrown to the crocodile, which is such a strange thing to do in film, to go there but not go there. It's like he was trying to save himself from a complete X rating.
That threat of sexual assault lingers in this film a little bit, but I think once you get the sense that sex is such a triggering thing for Judd, Haiti says it, by the way, in her interview with the sheriff, which this is something that I noticed about the film that is very interesting that I'll talk about in a second. But she says that all this guy used to do was go to the brothel and he would look at the girls and he would just like mutter and say insane shit, talk about his gators, talk about The fact that he's got a kind of a Cat Mayhab thing. This gator took his leg. He's got a false leg. And scared the girls. He scared them, and then it got to the point in which he wasn't welcome at the brothel anymore. Ruby knows enough to tell Clara not to mention that you work at the brothel because they know something is going to set him off, and maybe he's just like a kindly old man unless you bring up sex, which is the source of, again, like you said, his hatred and frustration. The interesting thing about this film that I think is something that either Kim Henkel or Tobe Hooper learned was to spread out the mania with other sets, other locales. In Texas Chainsaw, you arrive on that property and you don't leave that property until the very end of the film, but you're really only ever shooting in, I think that, what is it, Texas Chainsaw has maybe like 3 main locations, and most of the movie just takes place within that house or around the property of that house. And the most intense horror is exclusively taking place in that house. This, people need to come to the Starlight Inn for the horror to happen, and meanwhile they're continuously having characters. One of the most shocking things of the script is Libby and her father are only at that hotel for a couple of minutes, and then they're like, you know what, actually we're gonna go look around in the town, get some food, and we'll come back later. And you're like, wow. I'm guessing that Tobe Hooper learned that maybe we should spread things out a little bit, not just have everyone arrive at the house and either die instantly or just keep it isolated and claustrophobic, which he could have done, seeing as this was all on set.
It would definitely have us not be able to sell ourselves into the story if we thought that every single person that stepped foot on this place died immediately, because the cop seems to be a real cop. He's not on the take. He's not really part of this. He, would have arrested him by now if every single person that went to the Starlight died and went missing. So we got this idea that, yeah, people are safe to show up and leave, depending on if, I don't know if Judd is busy with somebody else tied to the bed upstairs, or if the alligator's full. I don't know if alligators get full, or the crocodile rather. I don't know what would have saved them, aside from just how lithe they were. They showed up and left right away with the promise to come back. I guess that is, they were also looking for the dead girl that had disappeared there just recently. I like that it's filmed on sets. It really lends to its theatricality, and it gives you that sort of like magic mass, that magic mirror that you're looking into while you're watching this film, where you're not completely sold that this, based on a true story is for real or anything, but you get to suspend your disbelief in a story, a real story land in a fantasy land of horror, which I really enjoyed that, because they're not really going for 100% realism with the setting or the story necessarily, but they do win the realism with the acting, the reactions, and the gore. Because this Neville Brand is such an amazing decorated war hero. The physicality of his role, it shows very well, like aside from him acting that he has a wooden leg, because I had to look up to see if he really did have one leg gone from the war, which he did not. He seemed to have escaped the war with both legs, but he acts it all very well. He acts angry. He acts like a Southern gentleman extremely well. So I'm very sold with all of the people and the story and the characters that they're portraying, where the light is surreal, and you know that it's a stage, and you know that it's lit with halogens, and you know that that's tinted with gels. Like you know that. And it's kind of interesting.
There is a way in which this film conducts its violence that I find extremely captivating, and the only other film that springs to mind that lingers on death the way that this film does is The Prowler, but this is a little bit more raw than any of that. They do not cut away from anything. You are going to see a dog be eaten. You are going to see a scythe get plunged into someone's neck, and you are going to watch them slowly die. It is not going to be a quick cut and then we're out of here. People are not going to just get stabbed once and fall over. They're not even going to get stabbed 3-4 times and just fall over. This film is going to demonstrate in a very Hitchcockian way how hard it is to kill a human being, even when it's something that we understand as movie watchers. Oh, well, this is just going to instantly kill them. You think you're going to get a decapitation. You're not getting a fucking decapitation. You are getting something so much more theatrical.
So much more theatrical and real. It reminds me in a way, the way it lingers like a Herschel Gordon Lewis film, but where people are sweaty and dirty and crying and angry and fighting back. They're not just a little portrait of a sexy dead girl with very red blood around them. It's so much more raw than that. And I really appreciate that quite a lot. Now, we do have this little girl who has lost her dog. She gets over it fairly quickly for a kid in a way, but she seems to have that little kid way of being confused. Like her mom has been missing for a bit. Her dog is dead, but she still runs around going, Snoopy, Daddy, Mommy. Totally confused and shocked and shell-shocked in a way because she is just running and screaming from all the terrible shit happening around her, because this little girl has been hearing and seeing some vile crap. She sees Judd attacking her mother.
Oh, that's a brutal scene. When there was a part of me that, especially with Marilyn Burns playing the character of Faye, she must have not have mind working with Tobe Hooper, because she came back for a role that was just as physically demanding of her. Because, man, wrapping her up in that plastic and hog tying her while slapping her. The little girl walks in on this and she's screeching, little Angie running for her life. It's so harrowing, and you get this sense when you're watching the film, like, oh my God, are they going to kill this little girl? And you think that maybe they might, because of how graphic the dog killing scene was. And so you're thinking to yourself, all right, it's Tobe Hooper. He will go there. We've demonstrated, he's kind of broken a cardinal rule that if you're going to kill a dog, make it clean, make it show the aftermath, or make it somewhat ambiguous. Say what you got to say, but don't make it graphic. This is like a dog, like you're watching Jaws closing around on this pathetic little like fucking terrier. Scuffy, that was the dog's name.
The real name, yeah.
The real name,
Scuffy.
Little Scuffy.
Who's dog paddling for all its might in the alligator pool. Like, it's very graphic looking. Like, I can understand how it's filmed and how there's no danger to the dog, and the dog probably had a lot of fun. But yeah, from a story viewer's perspective, brutal. But now we've got this man with a wooden leg chasing after a girl with polio who is wearing a leg brace, and your heart is just breaking because you're almost convinced he's gonna do it. He's gonna kill this little girl.
She manages to get under the lattice underneath the house, and this is a tip for everybody. The bottom of your house, my cottage is up like this too, so there's lattice surrounding it, and if you go underneath there, there is some bric-a-brac under there, but not a lot. Clean out the bottom of your fucking house. It's not a garbage dump. Don't let stuff linger in there, because now you got yourself an acute case of little girl and you can't get to her because she's too wily. She's able to move around in this junk and you can't get yourself in there. You're older. You are missing one of your own legs, and it's just not worth the time. She's not going anywhere. We'll just lock up the lattice, I suppose, and go upstairs and tie down Faye. And again, Marilyn Burns, like, she's like, God, every time I work with Tobe Hooper, I'm just tied to something.
Yeah. And just messy makeup. She just like a crying, weeping mess, and looks filthy and is wearing half of her clothes, and just the poor girl. But she's acting it so well, because not only does she spend almost the whole film tied to a bed, writhing like almost as vigorously as Regan from The Exorcist, trying to get out of her binds. Her daughter is spending the rest of the movie almost underneath the house screaming at the death and mayhem and destruction going on. It's strange to me that little Angie stays quiet through a lot of these scenes where other people show up to find missing women. The police will show up eventually, and like there's people there, but she's like not screaming for help until later on when she is screaming for help. People are upstairs and are confused about the sounds of many different women going on in the house, which is a really wonderful pivotal scene. But before we get there, we do have the sister and father of the prostitute that had gone missing at the very beginning, Judd's erstwhile date, I suppose. They're looking for her. They have a picture. They go to her. They go to the brothel owner. They go to the police. They're doing the thing that people do where this distraught older man is trying to find his other daughter.
Yeah, he is very singular minded in wanting to do this. And this is Harvey Wood. Harvey is terminally ill. We learn this from Libby while she's having a conversation with the sheriff in a bar. Another just, man, that bar scene. What do you want? I'll get to that in a second. But like when you have Libby and her father, she seems to be the person that's trying to keep him calm and trying to understand that he's losing his temper, but he's been under a lot of pressure. He is terminally ill. He's dying. His daughter is missing. He spent a fortune on private investigators trying to locate her. We don't know why Clara ran away from home. We could suspect all we want, but he does want her back. And Libby seems to be the person who is there to speak for him when he loses his shit. So I would suspect Clara left the house for a reason, and it was probably him. And perhaps on his deathbed, I suppose he wants to make amends and find her again. Either he genuinely feels bad or he is controlling. But when he brings that photo to Judd, his mannerism shifts because, again, he only knows Clara as a prostitute. And he has a very low opinion of prostitutes, and it seems sex in general. The only thing that I think that he could be more angry at is Buck himself. Buck is raring to fuck, so he doesn't like all that rutting. You know what I'm saying? Can't stop all that rutting. But
I love that he uses the term rutting. That's one of my favorite ways to describe the disposition of someone like Buck.
Yes, but when he says that, well, that's at the brothel, whorehouse, however he says it, that causes Harvey to just want to leave immediately. And so they go off on a grand adventure and they're going to piece together information. But when they get to that brothel, it's a real, we don't know anything. I've never seen that girl in my entire life.
Yeah, I've got some nice property you want to buy, though. You want to buy that property? Let's talk you up about the property. I don't know if I'm actually verbally whitewashing you or like rolling you out the door by totally distracting you by talking about something else to just reinforce the fact that I've never seen this girl in my life, kind of thing. It's just a really weird conversation. And when they leave and we have Miss Hattie in her brothel office, walking away from the closed door, and she's alone, I expected her to be like, never liked that girl anyway, or give us a line that we know that she is bamboozling them, but she doesn't. She's just like, yeah, well, that's that.
I would push back on that because she has the line where she calls them fools, like old fools. And to me, her tone changes enough that she seems to be playing up the, oh, I'm just a doddering, oh dearie, I don't know, that old Jed, you don't want to be messing. It's really giving, no, you kids don't want to be messing around in some old house, do you? You don't want to bring those, like, it's that sort of, that local with a secret that is not going to, they're outsiders. And if your daughter was foolish enough to get tangled up in the Starlight Inn, well, That's her problem, and I don't want any part of it. So I kind of feel like she was taking them for a ride with the doddering old woman routine, but it's hard to really say.
She could have been saying they're fools for not taking her up on that great land that she has, for sale, cheap, a low price just for you.
There's a pecan tree on it.
That line wasn't enough. A pecan tree. I know. I was interested. If you can't tell.
I bet you could buy it for a song too. These days,
totally.
it would cost you a fortune, but back then, oh my God, you probably just like a couple of chickens and $25. We'll call it squares.
Yep, exactly. Like this house that I'm living in right now was probably worth about $30,000 at the time, and it could be, I don't know, $500,000 now for a regular little condo. But anyway, yeah, it wasn't a line that sold it to me.
That's fair.
If it would have been just maybe another line like "Fools, they'll never find her," or "Fools, she's a lost cause going to Judd's house," or
yeah.
"Fools, she should have stayed here," or something.
Yeah, I like that. That never liked her anyhow is a pretty good line to indicate that. Well, she's dead.
Yeah, that would have helped. That would have helped.
Harvey returns back to the Starlight Inn because it seems like everyone is saying mostly the same thing. Is that there's something going on with this fucking place, and let's bring them back now. While all of this is happening, Judd is becoming increasingly more disturbed. He's more agitated. It's giving Leatherface, more kids keep showing up at my fucking house. Yep. And this seems to be a cascading effect in which someone showed up and I did a oopsie whoopsie little murder, entered a fugue state, and I killed a prostitute. I've done this before. People are aware of this. But we'll just bury that. Then all of a sudden, while he was still in his bloodlusty phase, real folks, regular folks showed up to briefly stay at his inn, and oh shit, their dog got eaten. Roy makes it a point to say that you're not going to get away with this, and he is going to take it upon himself to kill this gator, which, Roy is like trying to protect. He doesn't mean anything. He doesn't discriminate. It's all instinct. It's all like, you can't blame the gator for doing this. It's just, it's an animal. It's an animal. Don't do this. Please don't do this. Roy is going to do this. So in order to protect his own gator, he kills Roy. And now that he's killed, like the dog is dead, he had to kill Roy because he needed to protect his gator. Now there's 2 more people that are still alive. And oh shit, people who are related to the Clara have shown up. And so it's quicksand. You can see him just trying to, and there's this really great moment that I fucking love when he's by himself and he's not necessarily muttering. He's staying quiet. And you see him sort of like looking around the main lobby area of his inn, and he takes a little duster and he kind of like dusts a little bit, even though that if you look at the inn itself, it's pretty run down. And I think you need to do a couple more things before you start dusting the furniture type thing. And he sort of like clutches it to his chest and he kind of just like looks around, and I just get this overwhelming sense that he is terrified this is his place. And if people start finding out what has happened, he's going to lose this place. And so I just got to fucking kill everybody. Like we have to just kill everybody and it'll all go away and I won't lose my place. And if someone comes around asking where all these people are, I've never fucking seen them. That's where I get. And it's all acted without dialogue. And I fucking love it so much.
Yeah, it seems great. It has some really like anachronistic music playing in the background, like these old Western ballads and stuff like that, which remind me a lot of like the way that Rob Zombie uses that same sort of music in House of a Thousand Corpses. So I really like the unsettling nature of this. And if we hadn't seen the beginning of this film where he assaults or begins to assault and then murders and feeds a prostitute to his alligator. If it had started with people showing up looking for a prostitute and us seeing him protecting his pet crocodile after it made a animalistic mistake, so to speak, we would be really conflicted. But because we know he's probably been in this position many times, he's probably spent at least 1 or 2 nights a week dusting his foyer and clutching his duster and wondering what the next 10 minutes of his life holds while he has a girl tied up upstairs, 2 people missing and dead on his property, and a little girl crawling around underneath his house. Like, it's just a very awkward moment for him. But I think it's portrayed really well that he goes through this quite often. He may forget he does too, though, because his particular mental state is not defined. He's really unpredictable. And I love this about him too, is that he can go from this really unsure, closed in on himself, very scared little boy almost, to a maniac with a scythe chasing down a grown man, which he does. With moments later, he is doing exactly that.
This death scene with Harvey is probably one of my top scenes in this entire film. I fucking love this so much. It's that almost animal-like, you dead? You dead? Like, he hits him with that scythe. It's one clean shot through the neck. And now Harvey is sort of struggling against the weight of the scythe, losing consciousness because he has a grievous neck wound right now. Like, and he's watching him slowly collapse onto the porch while, like, Judd almost seems afraid of him, like afraid. He's like, I don't want you swiping out at me or anything like that. And it just fucking lingers. Like, Tobe Hooper just sets that camera and is just, watch this motherfucker die. It's great. It's so fucking good.
It really is. And it's very realistic, us being able to watch this happen, as well as we're in the position of Judd in so many points within this film because we spend a lot of time with him, and here we're right alongside him, being scared to see this man die, although Judd is probably looking forward to it. We're like wondering what he's going to do. What if he can get out of this? What happens if he can remove that scythe? Will his head just fall off? Like, all these morbid questions just percolate because it's just such a dynamically shot scene. And the kills aren't like somebody walks into a shadowy corner where you know the killer is. The killer has to actively cross terrain to get to the person they're killing in this, and the killer, the person being killed, actually needs to cross some terrain to try and retaliate. So there's like a lot of motion going on this little area that we know is a soundstage. Like, it's not very big area, but it feels like a lot of space is taken up by this kill. With a gigantic implement. The scythe is a big, heavy, scary, sharp thing that's like several feet of very sharp blades. So it lends another angle of like danger to this whole scene. I really love this kill. It is acted impeccably. It is shot very well. The gore is realistic in that it's not spurting out in an anime kind of sense. It's not like a Sushi Typhoon moment here by any means, but it has the gravity of a very realistic kill.
Yeah, I completely agree. When we find ourselves in the situation where now Harvey is dead, it's like you have these different groups of people that have kind of come to this property and they just keep getting picked off. And like Judd, you keep wondering, what's the end of it? Because now you've killed Harvey and Libby is going to come back. You know that. That's her father. And you know that she's been with the sheriff this entire time. Now, Libby is a hungry lady. She wants to get some food in her system. So they go to the bar and she is able to talk with the sheriff a little bit more about her father's motivations and her background. All the while, who's at this bar shooting a game of pool? why it's old Buck, Robert Englund. If you were worried that character is not going to show up multiple times in this film and be a significant part of it, don't you worry, don't you fret. Old Buck is here to stay. This bar scene is absolute insanity. And this is what I'm talking about when Tobe Hooper has this knack for putting characters into scenes where you're asking yourself, what is with all the tension? And it evokes this anxiety that I have where I'm around strangers and someone might be acting a little tilted at the bus stop, and you're kind of like, oh, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Like, don't fucking freak out. I'm not in the mood for this today. There is a guy at the bar. So first of all, Robert Englund is with Lynette, and Lynette is very beautiful and she's playing pool. That's Janice Blythe's character who played Ruby from The Hills Have Eyes. And
then in comes Charlie Manson.
Like doing like slap dance things where there's this guy who's checking out Lynette's ass and just kind of gets right up in his face. And you're like, who are these characters? Why are we watching these guys almost get into a fight where it's super awkward? This guy shows up and gets in this guy's face. What are you looking at? What are you looking at? See something you like? Fucking grabs the guy's beer and takes a swig off of it. Fucking starts like slapping himself silly. Then he starts slapping the other guy. The other guy grabs him and fucking shoves him up against the wall. And Robert Englund kind of interjects and is like, hey man, it's your shot. Like, I'm like, what is this? What the fuck is this? And to tap it all off, to the piece de resistance of this fucking scene is when we cut back to the sheriff and Libby, who are, by the way, in the same fucking bar eating and having coffee. The sheriff looks over a couple of minutes later. He's like, hang on a sec, I gotta go handle this. And you think, oh, is it the dude that's like slapping himself and causing fights and drinking people's beers? No, it's Robert Englund, who's not saying or doing anything except playing pool with this girl. And the sheriff's just like, get the fuck out of here. You got to pack it in. Like, you're out of here, mister. What?
Yeah. And it kind of needed an extra line in there. I'm like, well, I'm going to go kick Buck out and he can take his crazy friend with him, because the other little Weasley weird slapping, joking, like what you see kind of dude, little Charlie, he looks like a little Charlie Manson. And that's how I imagine Charlie Manson to act. Like, he's too crazy, so I'm going to go for the less crazy person in Judd, or the less crazy person in Buck, and be like, Buck, you got to go because you got to take your crazy friend with you, because I'm afraid to even approach him as a police officer who has a gun on his hip because this guy's too weird.
And just so you don't think Buck is too normal, he also almost fucking gets into a fight with some other random bar goer that's just like standing on the other side of the pool table because he's looking at Lynette. I'm like, man, what?
There's a very weird attitude toward women in this whole thing. And I am no scholar. Luckily, many people are. And this, unlike many of the films we've watched lately where I'm just dying to read papers on them and none exist, there's many papers on this. So if you're as interested as I am into like these two other guys that are almost peanut gallery onlookers to this sort of thing, like what role do they play, let alone what role do all of the reactions of the women play? What are we getting out of the moment that we come to in the house where there is a moaning, weeping, crying girl underneath, a moaning, a sexually excited woman in one bedroom, and in the bedroom above it, a girl that is crying and weeping and trying to break free. We almost have like this mother, maiden, crone trifecta going on in this house of noisy women. It's so interesting, but way above my pay grade as a podcaster. You can turn to this book called American Twilight, the films of Tobe Hooper, a whole book written with many papers, and one talks about the lizard brain Ouroboros Human Anti-Exceptionalism and Tobe Hooper's Eaten Alive and Crocodile by author Mike Thorne, who's also a horror author. So if you've read other Mike Thorne stuff, he's a Canadian horror author. I know I have. He has a paper in this as well. So they talk there about this like two brain, lizard brain, the reactions of the men are just as interesting as the reactions of the women in this. And I think this bar scene sort of like, you know, you've got some women, if they're not being sexually assaulted or terrified or tied up or beat up, they're just more interested in selling land, picking something yummy to eat, or calming the children.
It really is this interesting take on different roles and how men are reacting around these women as well. You have aggression in the form of so many of the men. Judd himself aggressive towards any sort of sexuality, but more violently, murderously aggressive towards the women themselves. He doesn't like Buck because Buck has a lot of sex and he doesn't like that, but he just tells Buck to get the fuck out of here. I never get a sense that he was going to kill Buck until later. But that, again, has nothing to do with him not liking Buck as a person. Again, all of these murders seem to be practical. Too many people are finding out about this. Then you have the sheriff who is this, he's like, well, I'm going to be the nurturing male figure. I'm going to like, oh, now don't you worry about it, miss. Like, we're going to figure this all out. And we're going to calm you down and we're going to calmly talk to people.
We're the ones that are going to like sort of play peacekeeper among all these ornery men.
Exactly. And it's so wild. And then the just like the absolute fevered pitch of horniness that all of these men demonstrate around Lynette, a very Janice Blythe, a very beautiful woman. Like, make no mistake, but it's just so wild that it's almost like Buck's behavior is so hyper aggressive, but he has to like fight other men like off constantly because she's just like a sexy singularity that just draws people towards her.
Yeah, like it's more of a study of animalistic behavior among people than the movie Crocodile is, or any of the other like man versus nature films are. Like having to go down to almost a base level to survive is sort of one of the themes here. But I think that we don't go down to a base level if we're these characters. We're already there, especially in the case of someone like Buck, or even the preening. Like, you could say that Lynette is flaunting, even though she's just moving around physical space as a female in a female's body. But she could be peacocking to a certain degree, a little tiny bit, not as much as somebody who looks like Marilyn Monroe at the beginning of this film, our ultimate peacock female, so to speak. So like it is, we start at an animalistic base nature. We don't go there. We don't end up there. We start there in this film, whether we know it or not, I think.
Yeah, very wisely put. Very wisely put. When Buck and Lynette are kicked out, that brings them to the Starlight Inn because Buck's already paid for a room. And one of the things that they mentioned a lot about Lynette is like, she's underage. Now, I don't know if that means under 18. I think it probably just means under 21.
I think so, because of the U.S. drinking laws, because they're like, the cops like, are you going to tell me that's Coca-Cola in that bottle or whatever? I think it's just 21. I don't think it's statutory rape laws, which also are a little bit more elastic state to state.
When she gets there with Buck, she smooths things over by doing what you would imagine is what she's very good at, like tickling your face, like flirting old man so they can get off their backs and they can go upstairs and have sex, which they try to do. I can't tell. Let me ask you this. Do we think Buck's a scumbag? I can't tell, because sometimes he seems like utter, absolute fucking garbage. But in this scene, he does get killed trying to help. Or you know what I mean?
He does. And I mean, The way that he's behaving at the beginning of the film, maybe that's the way he behaves when he's paid for sex, which is a very different way that a man behaves when he hasn't. And maybe he's got some aspirations of white picket fence with Lynette in the center of them. I don't know. And that could be it, because I suspect he didn't pay for sex with her. He's only paying in the way of paying for a motel room, if he did that at all. But yeah, I think it's just he's a very different man when he's not in a brothel, which I suspect most men are.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never been to one myself, so I can't
neither.
say for sure. But he's also quite tender in his lovemaking with Lynette. They don't actually have sex, but it's a lot of like mild touching and giggling and things, taking things slow, which is not the Buck that we fucking met at the beginning of this movie whatsoever.
It's not, and he's letting her set the pace too, which is also something new for this film as far as the way that women are allowed to be.
You are not kidding. Faye is very close by, and she is struggling and screaming. Let me tell you something. If you weren't aware that that was Marilyn Burns, when you start hearing her screech, you know that's Marilyn Burns. There is no more distinct screaming in horror, I don't think. And when that happens, Judd, who has tried to get Buck out of there, because like, we're all full up, I don't have room for you. Buck isn't going to be swayed. He paid for a room. He's going up there. So he tries the old turn up the radio technique, and the radio is a bit of a mood killer because he's playing that fucking twangy country music. And Buck, Robert Englund, wants to, have sex. And so they can also kind of vaguely hear the radio. They can hear the radio for sure, but they can also vaguely hear Faye struggling. And so when Buck leaves the bedroom to try to figure out what the fuck is going on, that's when he starts hearing Angie's cries from coming below the inn. And that's when he goes to investigate. And what I like about how Robert Englund plays this scene is it really comes off as all of that hollering and bravado and toxic masculinity, however you want to talk about it, it really drains away, and he becomes a quiet, kind of introspective, what's that noise? Like, fun is fun and rowdiness is rowdiness, and I'll throw a fist if you look at my girl wrong, but I think I hear someone in trouble. Like, and it's so wildly different from any scene that we've seen him before. It starts to the slow descent of how gentle he seems to be with Lynette. But then this scene, like, I fucking feel bad for him when he gets shoved in that water.
Yeah, it's all because he behaved in like an animalistic way. Whether, we say animalistic, give a negative connotation to that, but caring for young children is an animalistic drive too, like wanting to progenate or wanting to protect and rear young ones is an animalistic drive. Mm-hmm. Hearing the sound of a crying girl is something that sparks the less dark animalistic natures in men and women. So like he is just responding again to another base nature, and acted so well. Like, and I don't know if that's part of their direction in this film. I don't know enough about the making of this film and what Tobe Hooper's direction was to them in filming this, but yeah, it all just sloughs away. He's not an angry, testosterone-ridden man right now. He is a caretaker for a very short time. A very short time before he is fed to this crocodile.
The funny thing about the way that these animals feed is, if you're wondering if they don't just eat people. What they do is they bring them down and drown them if they're not already dead, which in a lot of cases they are, and they're shoving them under logs and things that are deep below the pool to get to that food later. They tenderize them in the water over a long period of time and go back to it later. So those bodies of the people that we have seen the gator pull down there are likely, probably not the dog. It was kind of a little chicken nugget there, but the other human bodies would be shoved underneath there. This is sort of bringing Judd to the peak of fiery madness, as I like to say. This triggers a chase scene when Lynette is going off that, again, let's just go back to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. One more again. Like, this chase scene with Lynette is fucking fantastic. She goes from like this absolute fucking stunning beauty queen to absolutely covered in like grease paint, messed up. She's falling. She's being chased through the woods, not unlike Marilyn Burns being chased in TCM by Leatherface themselves. And just like in TCM, Lydia, we have a nameless, faceless, good old-fashioned, helpful citizen, good Samaritan, picks up Lynette off the street in a little car, and she gets away.
He looks uncannily like Tom Savini too. So I'm just like picturing this little Tom Savini taking a drive in his MG, and all of a sudden there's a screaming girl, and he's like, "Well, hop in, little lady. I'll take you to the hospital." Like helpful Sam. But yeah, it is. I wish this was the only point when I wish they weren't on a soundstage, because it's quite obvious she's not running through a forest, and I wish that they were able to cut to, maybe to harken back to Texas Chainsaw Massacre even more, running through a field surrounding and have no one there to help you until you get to the road where other civilization is. But civilization isn't that far away, because she doesn't have to run far, not only because it's a soundstage in a false forest and we don't really get the full-on long throaty chase scene, and we don't get a chase scene that ends with the killer getting her, which most of them ultimately do. And this isn't the first time that we've had poor Judd running on his wooden leg trying to catch somebody who gets away ultimately, and I'm suspecting it happens a lot, and this is why the cops haven't come down on him, because a lot of people do get away, luckily, because the forest is so small. I don't know, but it is enjoyable for what it is, because it does satisfy that sort of slasher film trope of chasing a screaming girl through the woods.
Yes, I do love that, because it's on a soundstage. When the car pulls up, it really just looks like they're on a stage. Like, yep. It does not look like she made it to a road and this car was driving on a road. It literally looks like they made some space for the trees and the car just like drove drove right there. It's a completely flat ground. Like, it does not look like earth whatsoever, but that's okay, because again, it lends itself to this surrealist quality. And you know what? Maybe back in 1976, Liz, when we didn't have all the resolutions that we do these days, it maybe the fog hit it a little bit better than what it actually did. Judd is in an absolute panic. He is just, where? He doesn't know where this girl has gone, but at the very least, he can head back and finish off little Angie once and for all. Done mucking around. I'm not going in under that house. I can't fit. I'm going to pull the gate by the pond, the little it's like a chicken wire type situation. I'm going to open that up, and I'm just going to let the gator do its nasty, nasty work. Meanwhile, Libby, who has returned to the Starlight Inn, not been able to find her father, takes off her coat and is not wearing anything underneath it. It's so wild to me when she takes it off. I was like, I'm sorry, that just looked like you were wearing an overcoat, and underneath your overcoat was just underwear.
It's not. It's a Chanel-inspired design, from what I can gather, if my fashion brain's working at all. It is a dress. It's definitely a dress. Okay, I used to have a brown dress that's similar to that in a way, where, yeah, you put a coat that looks just like it over top, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, it is a dress. It's not a coat. Yeah, if you look at some of the Chanel A-line dresses, they look kind of similar, and they're belted as well. So yeah, that's the plight of being a woman in the modern day of this film, is that you're gonna have sore calves from your high heels and can't wait to take that goddamn belt off.
She hears Faye crying her eyes out, struggling, and manages to rescue her. This triggers fucking chaos. The one thing that Tobe Hooper does well, and every time you cut to Tobe Hooper films, you are going to see people screaming, and you are going to see people screaming over other people screaming, and you're going to cut to other people screaming. And it is just absolute 100% bug fuck hysteria. And it is cranked up to 11. This entire sequence, you are going to see people running and moving. Faye takes a drop off the fucking top level of that staircase down to the lobby area that looks brutal.
Yeah, and it looks like a lot of them have done their own stunts in this too, which is wild. Yeah, Faye's not having a good time. She didn't have a good time in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but at least that good time, it didn't last long once she was like sort of free, where it got kind of worse for a minute, but then it got better. Here it just gets worse and worse and worse. Being tied to the bed, she was probably the safest.
And if you want to talk about traumatized, little Angie is running from this crocodile who has made it underneath the house. Libby sees this little girl running. Now she's trapped over the fence and falling backwards into the gator's, like almost into the gator's jaws. And Libby, who, by the way, has no idea who these people are.
No, she just showed up here. Yeah, like I love the idea of thinking from Libby's perspective. She showed up after a long day. Her dad must have gone into town to get a bite to eat too. Takes her shoes off, gets half undressed, all like, I'm going to relax now. And then there's a woman tied to a bed, a screaming kid underneath. There's like death and mayhem surrounding her. And Judd, who was nothing but sweet as a peach to her up until this point, is a raging maniac swinging a scythe around, raging to kill these girls with a man-eating crocodile coming after them.
That when Judd turns the corner up those stairs and is just screaming at the top of his lungs, wielding that scythe, it's so great. There's so much fucking tension and aggression and panic in the room. The girls' reactions, like instantaneous, turn on their heels. They're screeching at the top of their lungs. Faye is struggling with him, and it's almost like Libby has no time to do anything because she immediately sees this little girl in panic.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Judd now is trying to make sure that the crocodile can finish its job, and instead is pulled in by the croc himself, like Cat Mayhab getting strapped to the side of the whale. If his chest were a heart, he would have shot it on the beast. He gets fucking pulled in there, and he's screaming. He was screaming before. Now he's screaming in pain and fear. The girls are screaming because they're watching a man getting eaten alive by a fucking crocodile. And it's wild. It's just absolute. And then, assuming because of Lynette, I assume, the sheriff finally shows up.
I do assume that, but like, did somebody go into town and get him otherwise? Was he tipped off to go there, or I don't know why was he going there to meet up with Libby?
I would think that Lynette, in the time frame, it's not a lot of time, so I'm not saying this fucking works out perfectly, but I think
Lynette would have gone to the cop shop.
Like the driver, she would have been like, listen, she's not wearing pants, she's covered in mud. Yeah. She says a guy is trying to kill her. Let's go to the sheriff. They go to the sheriff. It's not a very big town. You don't get a sense that it's a very big town. They get to the sheriff's office. You got to get out to the Starlight Inn right now because there's this fucking crazy guy and he tried to kill me and he killed Buck. And so the sheriff shows up by himself. I guess like it must be tough to be in a town where you got no deputies, but then he shows up and Judd has already been pulled into the water. Libby has, interestingly enough, Libby is the one that rescues Angie and is cradling her, while Faye is sprawled out on the dock or on the porch crying for her baby, like, save my baby, my baby. You would think that they would, like, either or you would think that it would be the other way around. I don't have a problem with it. I just think it's interesting that Libby is the one that is, like, saving her kid, whereas Faye isn't involved in saving the kid at all because she was so hurt by getting tossed off those top stairs she could barely walk.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of parallel here, which is something that I wish. I don't know if there's other movies that explore this as well. It's explored a little more often in extreme fiction in literature, but like, it's like, I'm too broken, or you've seen too much and I can't mother you right now. Or like in, again, Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses, my daughter is too screwed up and beat up and tortured and doesn't look like my daughter anymore, so I can't father her right now. So I open up the shed where my dying daughter is, and I take a step back instead of toward her because it's just too monstrous. What little Angie has seen unfold over the last, I don't know, half hour that this actually takes place is too monstrous. So I think that Faye is just, I would rather her be in the arms of a clean, capable, mothering person right now, when I'm too shattered and too shocked and too inhuman to mother right now.
I like that. We roll credits on this bitch, and that is the end of Eaten Alive.
We got a wooden leg floating in the river, and that's it, which I was kind of surprised. I thought there'd be a little more prologue, but no, just, yeah. Or not prologue, a little more afterward to this, but no, just, yeah, roll credits. We get to find out what the name of the dog was.
Scuffy died for all our sins. I think it would be bad enough, traumatizing enough, if you saw your little dog get eaten by an alligator or a crocodile in front of you, and then instead of like really nurturing and comforting you, your mother just repeatedly just told you to calm down, while your father vaguely looked like he was threatening to kill your mother, and then they have arguments in front of you while you're like clutching your ears. That day itself is one for the therapists. But on top of the fact that your father gets killed, you see your mother being tied up and terrorized by a fucking person. You yourself are threatened to be eaten by a gator, and then you watch a man be eaten alive in front of you. Well, little Angie's not going to have a good go. Hopefully the 80s weren't too rough on her. But yeah, it's very... I'm really glad that we were finally able to tackle this film.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad that I got to watch it. So thank you for bringing it to the table. I really, I want to make sure I've watched all of Tobe Hooper's films, because watching this halfway through, I was just like, yeah, this is very Tobe Hooper land. I wish that he would have been able to be around for the even more people at conventions, and with the advent of more podcasts. Like, he passed away and wasn't really as interested in his stardom in the last like decade of his life. He was too busy with being terrorized himself, it seems. So like, I wish that he was still around, maybe not to make films if he was done with that, but to at least hear how appreciative we are for his vision and some of his more singular visions in some of his earlier films.
That's what I always go back to when I think about Eaten Alive, when I had wondered why, if he hadn't been scooped up by the studios, and if he was going to remain in a fairly independent space when he was making his films, would we have more Texas Chainsaw 1s and Eaten Alives than we ended up with? The Funhouse has its level of hysterics in it that I think are a lot more muted, especially in this film. I would even argue that this film is way crazier than the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You remember that screeching and energy throughout TCM, but you're mostly thinking about like the last 20 minutes, last 30 minutes of the film. And the rest of it is a lot of, teenagers walking in and out of rooms and long language shots and things of that nature. Although I don't want to downplay things like the van scene and stuff like that. Obviously there is hints of it, but this is just, people are just screeching through this entire film. And has so much energy in it. The Funhouse has moments like this, but they're so much more muted, and they're really saved towards the end. And he returns to form a bit with TCM2, and I'd always like wondered about the comedy that he would insert into his films as well. Whereas Eaten Alive seems like, I understand that people think that Texas Chainsaw is quite funny. I never got that. I do not understand the humor of it. I think that's a very serious film, but people are.
Franklin's funny. He makes fun. He's funny when they're talking about head cheese, the hitchhikers. Funny, like there's really that scene. That scene's funny. That's it. I'm not going to disagree with you. He does fall. He does fall out of his wheelchair, and that's pretty funny. I love a good pratfall. But but this film, if someone says like, this has got like comedic elements in it, I'm like, where are the comedic elements in this? This is not fucking funny. Like, this is mad. And it's because there's so much more vulnerable people in constant danger. Like I said, it would be bad enough if Angie was just a little girl, but they just go ahead and make sure she's got polio on top of it to make it extra sad. And you think that it's sad that Snoopy died? Well, we're going to make sure that it's like a little helpless like terrier. It's going to be like a little baby dog that gets killed too. And we're going to name it Snoopy, a dog that everybody knows is the hero and everybody loves and everyone can identify with as a dog that's well taken care of and well loved and adored nationwide. Yeah, we're going to name it Snoopy. And then we're going to have her cry for Snoopy for a half hour after it's obviously dead and she knows it's dead because she saw it die. Yeah. It's really pulling at our heartstrings. I think the only real comedy to be found, aside from the idea of, arrow through the head moment, because it is basically an arrow through the head moment with the scythe through the neck. And we do have like a sort of underneath many levels of macabre and terror and horror and straight gross out. We do have a little tiny thread of comedy, because if you had no heart at all and disregard all of that other stuff going on in that scene, it's a guy wobbling around with an arrow in his head. But then you have some of the reactions to Roy's behavior. You kind of can't help but laugh, like, your colloquial guy at the bus stop where you're like, what is this guy gonna do? He's either going to be acting very terrifying and you're worried that he's going to do something dangerous to himself or others, or he's acting in sort of a jester like crazy way where it's kind of funny and you're trying to not laugh. Like the girl that was talking to herself and swearing on the bus, and the bus driver had to come back and say, you really got to watch what you're saying and try not to swear because people are complaining. And she said, what? I'm on the phone. And she didn't have a phone. I couldn't help but laugh. But it's sad that maybe she's having a psychiatric moment, right? But you laugh because it's funny, right? So I could see some people's reaction to Roy's behavior being to laugh. But, that's just another animalistic reaction among the many that are found in this film.
So what do we got next for them, Lids?
Coming up next, we have another West pick, Nightmare, a film I'd never even heard of. I vaguely recognize the one sheet, but yeah, I just like the title.
If you are interested in New York sleaze, let me toss some words out to you here. Maniac, Driller Killer, Judd. All of these great, dirty New York films. Well, I got the dirtiest one of them all, Nightmare.
Good. I'm looking really forward to this because I like New York sleaze, and I like that you like New York sleaze.
I have been captivated by the city of New York since watching gritty horror and crime films that took place all before the Giuliani cleanup. And so my vision of New York is like a dirty, steamy landscape with like a jazzy saxophone over opening credits. And I'm like, yeah, that's New York. That's not New York anymore, but it was at one time. And we'll be revisiting that with Nightmare.
I'll take my taxi drive to the Warriors. Big Bopper's on the radio. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
And on that note, I'm Wes Knight.
And I'm Typical Lydia.
And you've been listening to Dead Air. If you like this show, you can find more episodes and other content on splatterpictures.net, Spotify, or wherever you download podcasts. We also upload all episodes to YouTube now, if you'd prefer to listen that way. You can find us across social media like Instagram, X, and TikTok, and the show is edited by Lydia Peaver and hosted by Lydia Peaver and me, Wes Knight. We'll see you next time.